certainly we think that there's been a need for additional leadership at the organization. And, you start to look for analogies in terms of other companies that have had iconic leaders step to the side and what happens to those stocks after those leaders step to the side. And we think that's a real possibility here. Apple is the obvious candidate for an example where the Apple stock appreciated pretty significantly for several years after Steve Jobs left. So as we look at this, we upgraded the stock in August based on Model 3 production reaching a point where they can hit some positive gross margins and generate a fair amount of operating cash flow from that operation. And we think that this may just be the obvious evolution for this organization, and we wouldn't be surprised to see Musk settle this fairly quickly. I think, he probably does want to stay involved in the company in an active way, and will try to do that. And certainly, on some level, could afford, what could be a modest fine. I think the DOJ case is another story, but we do think he's going to move fairly quickly to try and settle this.
Mike, you put the stock move in perspective, actually pointed out it's been lower in recent weeks.
3 weeks ago, the stock was in the 250s, right? So after the whole kind of buyout story played out, and you did have some kind of a bearish tone, and it really just points up the fact that the stock moves with these rushes of euphoria and then a little bit of despair based on just the latest kind of data points. So not to say that the market is taking a sober view right here and deciding what it's all worth in the long term, but simply that this is a stock that is basically priced in so much for so much in the future. It's not about today's business, that it can just swing wildly around that.
Sure, but it needs access to capital.
It totally does, and that's why I'm not saying this is the right price right here. But basically, this is not the market saying game over because the stock's at 279 when it was at 252 on September 7th.
Gene Munster, come back in and update us on your thoughts. What do you agree with and what do you disagree with in terms of what's been said in the last 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, I'm going to fast forward and give the playbook for the next year. What's going to happen is there's going to be a limbo period. It could be 3 months to a year where we're going to be discussing this. But ultimately, as some of the panelists have discussed, this is going to end in a fine. Elon Musk is going to move quickly to dismiss it. It is highly unlikely. I mean, it hasn't been litigated yet, but I would put less than a 5% chance that he ends up being just outright removed from Tesla. And if, in fact, he does have a different role that doesn't have investor relation related to it, I think that would be a positive. So I think understand the emotion of a press conference with the SEC and the significance of this, but I rather suspect that this will get settled in the next year and be a non-event.
Colin, it sounds like you're sticking with a bullish call as well. And your price target of, I think, 385 for the stock. Do you think that access to capital is going to be an issue?
I think it really depends on what the cash flow metrics look like when they report the third quarter. Based on what we're hearing and seeing, it looks like they're going to generate, at least close to that operating cash flow break even, if not better than that. And if those numbers come through, then I do think the stock actually works from here as folks start to, expect a settlement for Musk separate from the company, which would, on a financial basis, leave the company pretty well intact. So we're going to stick with that call right now and wait for those numbers, but we're still expecting bullish results here going in to next week with the delivery numbers.
Stephanie, your take in terms of, you mentioned earlier this could be a positive catalyst in the medium term or the longer term for the company. If it blows out the production numbers next week or the earnings after that, could it rally, or is this a hold on the stock in the short term?
I think it's an overhang, for sure. So could it rally initially rally if they do the numbers and the cash flow looks better than expected? Sure, it certainly could, but I just think this is too much of an overhang. We don't know what the management structure is going to even look like. We don't even know if he's going to be around or in what capacity he's around. And I just think loss of confidence takes a long time to rebuild.
And look, the SEC doesn't do this with every one of these situations. The idea that Elon's going to write a check and it's going to go away, we just don't know that right now. If you look at some of the facts that are being presented by the SEC here, they really think he was freelancing this idea of a take-private transaction, and he kind of went off with it, and he did have a reason to get the stock higher, whether it was because he wanted to have a better position for the convertible notes or because he hates the short sellers.